It's like living in a foreign country. These wise words once muttered by the great goalscorer Ian Rush speaking to Kenny Dalglish after his move back from Juventus. And that really sets the tone for this video and explains maybe why British players struggled to move over to Italy, Spain, Germany, and why it looks like it seems to be changing in the future. And it sounds ridiculous that this funny, obvious historic quote actually sums up a lot of English British players' opinions towards foreign countries, because the first point that we're going to go for is it is a different culture. It is like living in a foreign country because it's so foreign to us. England, in my opinion, is completely different to the rest of Europe because, for one, the rest of Europe learn English from a very young age. I'll put a map on the screen where it is currently mandatory. But I think it's such a culture shock coming from England to other countries, and there seems to be somewhat of an arrogance with English players towards foreign leagues, as you know, we constantly say the German league is a farmers league. Even at times people have said Spain and Italy are farmers leagues because it's been Barcelona and Real Madrid winning it. And I think that is part of the reason why in the past players haven't moved abroad. And this isn't to say that British players haven't done well abroad, because look at someone like Steve McManaman, for example, left Liverpool on a free and won European Cups with Real Madrid and was fantastic. And I believe he is still known as El Maca over there, which it shows people like that have an influence. However, you do look at it, he is the exception, not the rule in that case. And even someone like an Ian Rush or someone like a Michael Owen, who wasn't terrible at Real Madrid, had a bit of an underrated career. He himself would even say that he struggled adapting to the culture, and sometimes he would find pleasure in going to the local airport to pick up the English newspapers, and he felt that it was unfair on his wife and young daughter to live in hotels while he's at training. And it's completely understandable circumstances. However, you'd always look at it, well, how do foreign players coming into England cope? But it always seems to fall back on the language barrier for the first point. It's people like Kevin Keegan apparently was fluent in German when he played in Hamburg. Graham Souness prided himself on learning the Italian lingo when he was in Sampdoria. However, people like David Beckham apparently didn't really learn much Spanish at Real Madrid. Likewise with Gareth Bale. They all can, say Hala Madrid in the press conferences and speak a bit of Spanish. However, when it comes down to it, we saw an interview with Fikayo Tomori speaking fluent Italian after being there about a year and a half, which just shows the dedication for some players. And it might be changing, but I think back in the day maybe, some players just didn't bother to learn the language, and then how are you really going to get immersed in the culture? How are you going to create bonds with your teammates or the manager when, frankly, you don't really know what they're saying? I think to go into culture, the way kids grow up in different countries playing football, I think is completely different to England. If you have ever been to Spain, if you have been to Holland or Portugal, you'll see kids playing futsal on the street or so, or playing like in the cages. And that does happen in England, don't get me wrong. There's cages in the local area near me, there's cages everywhere, London, everywhere. But it's focused a lot more on athleticism, in my opinion and in my experience. How many people have we played at Sunday League level who got a scholarship to Bradford City, to Leeds United, to Man City, because they were quicker than everyone else at a young age, they were taller than everyone else at a young age, and it wasn't necessarily focused on their technical skills, it was focused on their athleticism. However, I think I did a video on Benfica last week, and they focused on technique so much that they'd sometimes drop a kid back into an age group so he wouldn't get physically, imposed by other kids, and it'd help him develop better. Whereas I think in England, it's the other way around. I think they want the athletic kids, and if they notice they could potentially put a bit of technique into them, then they'll do that. And a lot of times it doesn't work. And therefore, over the years, the English game is a lot more physical, a lot more intense compared to maybe the Spanish game. Spanish game is a lot more technical. And I listened to the Overlap podcast with Gary Neville, Roy Keane, Ian Wright and Jamie Carragher, and they were just talking, these are top world-class players at the top of their peaks. They were talking about playing the Italian teams and the Spanish teams. I think Gary Neville was on about Deportivo La Coruña, and he just could not get the ball of them apparently. And these are relatively, in the football world, not massively rated players. Top quality players, don't get me wrong, but not compared to the Zidans or the Ronaldinhos. And therefore there's another problem, because the players who have done well abroad, a Steve McManaman, a Gary Lineker, very dynamic players, very quick players, very technical players. However, you don't see many, let's face it, maybe a James Milner, who I love James Milner. You're not going to get many James Milners in Spain, in Italy, maybe in the German league, and we'll come on to that later because I think the German league has quite a lot of similarities to the English game. However, I think the technique in other countries does far outweigh the English game, as we've seen in major tournaments, and therefore players might not want to move over there because it doesn't suit the game. How can we forget about the finances? The finances is a huge way why players aren't moving abroad and are staying in England because, let's face it, probably ever since the Premier League came in, the finances and the money were just getting pumped around so much in the English game where the wages were increased and we saw loads of foreign talent come in because that's where the money was and that's where the best teams were. And we've seen that at the moment. If you can play for a Burnley and be on 40, 50 grand a week compared to a top 4 French team side and earn 20, 30 grand a week, you're probably going to choose Burnley because it's in your home country and also the pressures aren't much but you're earning more money and it does make financial sense in that case. And that's just because obviously the English TV rights are so much more. I believe they're about 5 to 6 billion at the moment, whereas the second is La Liga and the Italian leagues, and it's about 2 billion less at the moment, which is just a massive disparity between the two. And it just leads to more and more players getting higher wages. I mean, even look, I'll put on the screen the Championship average wage. It's not too far off, say, the French League average wage or the German League. I mean, the French League is completely pushed up by Mbappe. If Mbappe wasn't in the league, the French average wage would be massively down. And unfortunately, and I might contradict this point later, players who are trying to get into the England squad or maybe the Welsh squad or whatever, they need to mainly be playing in England because, unfortunately, Southgate and previous managers pick, obviously in the past has been Man United players, Liverpool players. However, it seems just to be Premier League players at the moment. The best case studies in recent years can be Jadon Sancho, Fikayo Tomori and Tammy Abraham. I think everyone and their dog has talked about Fikayo Tomori, how he's not been involved in the England squad in recent years. And a lot of people don't watch him, and I don't really watch a lot of AC Milan. However, I think we can all see in the Champions League he's clearly good enough to be in the squad. However, it feels like there has to be a community outcry for him to be involved. Tammy Abraham's another one. On his day, he's probably our second or third best striker if everyone's playing at the peak of their game, obviously behind Harry Kane. He struggles to get picked for the England squad as well because an Ollie Watkins is on match of the day every night because he's banging in goals. And I know Tammy Abraham's injured at the moment, but Gareth Southgate is not going to go to Italy every single week. Of course, he'll have representatives watching all their games. However, it always feels like there is an English bias. And I do think history hasn't proved well on this, but Jadon Sancho at the time, people had to force him to get into the England squad and give him a game. And yes, it didn't turn out too well. I'm not his massive fan. However, he was smashing it in the Bundesliga. He got in their team this season, I believe in about 3 years ago now. I think he had most assists in the league. And he was fantastic for that Dortmund side, wasn't he? It seemed like he could barely get a game for England, whereas people like a Marcus Rashford, who is completely up and down for Man United at the time, he would be straight into the squad. Phil Foden, who was in and out of the Man City squad at the time, I know now he's not, he was straight into the squad. And so many of these players were picked over someone like Jadon Sancho because he was in Germany and the eyes weren't on him as much. But to finish this point off, the two quick simple answers are really mainly money and the language barrier and obviously the culture, because there's too much money in the English game for players to just give away to go play for a mid-table Italian side where they could be earning double that in England. And also it's the language barrier, because I can speak from experience being from England. I believe it is mandatory from year 7 and 8 in my school at least, and there's optional going on that. And also you'd either have German or French, or you could do both maybe. However, you compare that to other schools who learn English from basically reception, and we did not learn French or German or Spanish in primary school. Others might, but maybe just in Yorkshire we don't. However, saying all of this, it is changing. We are seeing a lot more English talent going abroad. We are seeing a lot of English talent mainly going to places like Germany or the Netherlands. And I think is a great thing for the game, because you get to see English players in other countries. They can develop the game a lot more. And it just helps them on their career, and it doesn't, they don't get stuck in Premier League academies. Start off my point on this. I think there's a massive culture in England. Maybe there is in other countries, but I know in England that if you don't win anything at the moment, you are terrible. Look at Steven Gerrard's legacy in England. He never won a Premier League, and it's seen as a lesser player, even though the Premier League is, football's a team game. But individually, people look at Gerrard in a worse way. And if he had won a Premier League, maybe he had joined a Man United or a Man City or an Arsenal or a Chelsea, then he would have been seen as the best player in the world or whatever. But because his achievements as a team are less, then his legacy, quote unquote, is worse than, I hate the debate, but the Paul Scholes, Lampard, whoever. And if you look at someone like Harry Kane at the moment, Harry Kane gets crucified in England about that. He hasn't won any trophies. And I think he has crumbled in the big moments. However, he's gone to Bayern Munich, who, up until this season, were 99% going to win a trophy in Germany or the Champions League. And he's chosen to do that. Yes, probably he wanted a bit of a break. He wanted to get away from Spurs. He might not have wanted to play in England. However, he also probably did that to get the trophy just curse off his back. And unfortunately, this is what social media has done to football conversations, because in football, if you don't win anything, and I'm guilty of this as everyone else is, if you don't win anything, you are seen as a less player, because if you put 2-2 against each other, you're going to take the person with more trophies. Unfortunately, I think this also has a massively negative effect on the players, because if you are constantly just thinking you have to win everything, and if you don't, you're a failure, it's a massive achievement just to do what Harry Kane did. Probably still could be the Premier League all-time scorer, the England's all-time scorer, but he's going to finish his career with potentially no trophies, and he'll be seen as a failure, which is just completely ridiculous. And I see why other players are going to other countries. But to also follow up on the social media point, I think brand is a big thing, especially nowadays, to players, and obviously it brings them more endorsements, it brings them higher salaries, and the big way of doing this is being in the Champions League, unfortunately. And you look at someone like a Wilfried Zaha. He could have been playing Champions League for a lot of clubs. However, he chose to go to Galatasaray in Turkey. And this was a lot to do with the Champions League, because he played in this year. They got knocked out in the group stage, unfortunately. However, he was on the global stage, wasn't he? Everyone was able to see how talented he was. And unfortunately, you're not going to be able to do that with Crystal Palace. And especially, maybe in England, he might not be able to start for a Champions League club, because the quality in England is getting so much higher now. And because of Klopp and Guardiola just simply raising the level in England, I don't feel average players can really sneak into those English Champions League sides anymore. I've watched Liverpool play terrible players in the Champions League. I'm looking at a Jimmy Traore, for example. I'm looking at a Lazar Markovic. So many of these players, John Flanagan, I think he played at the Bernabeu. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think you need to be at the top of your game. And yes, there are some average players. Newcastle, for example, I think Paul Dummett probably got a game in this Champions League this year. However, in most cases, even if you're a quality of a Wilfried Zaha, unless you're coming off the bench, which obviously he won't want to do, you're not really going to start for a top 4, top 5 side. But I think we're seeing a lot of young players go to Germany, for example, like a Jude Bellingham, a Jadon Sancho. Reece Oxford is playing for Augsburg still, because in Germany, obviously, they have the 50+1 rule, which limits them financially. They can't bring in all the players under the sun because they can't have too much private investment. So they focused on youth a lot in Germany, which I love. I think it's a fantastic thing. It's probably why Germany has been so successful over the years. But I think English players are noticing that now and are seeing that Dortmund are probably the best stepping stone club in the world. I can't really think of another one who are better. Maybe Ajax, maybe Southampton back in the day. But Borussia Dortmund generate players so well. Erling Haaland, Jadon Sancho, Jude Bellingham, all top quality players that they've taken maybe through their academy, or they've taken from smaller teams and they've given to bigger teams. And I think players are seeing that now and going, well, if Jude Bellingham can go from Birmingham at 16 years old, 2-3 years he captains the side and then moves to Real Madrid and is one of the best players in the world within 4 to 5 years. It's not going to be every case, but it could help someone else get to a higher level that they might not be able to get through the traditional English way. Take Madueke from Chelsea. I think he's a great young player, but he was in the Tottenham academy and decided to go to PSV. I believe Manchester United were after him at the time. He went to PSV, created his name over there, became a great player, challenged for league titles, I believe he played in Europe, and then Chelsea saw, I think a lot of teams saw him really, and they brought him back over to England, and now he starts for Chelsea. In and out, he starts for Chelsea basically. And this might not be able to happen if he played for Spurs, but there are so many reasons why once in the past English players, British players didn't go over to foreign countries as much. And I think there are a lot of reasons why players are nowadays, and I think that's great for the game because it gets players seeing different cultures, seeing different tactics, seeing different coaches, players, everything. And diversity is nothing but good for the English team, because when Tomori learns how to defend through when they had Maldini as the sporting director, probably the best centre back of all time, probably had a few conversations with him, it's only going to help his game. And when Jude Bellingham learns how to play on the stage at Real Madrid in front of the Bernabeu and be the star, he's surely going to take that into the Euros this summer. But let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about the state of English players going abroad. There's a lot of good players at the moment in abroad teams, especially obviously Jude Bellingham. And I think it seems to be the curve that is changing at the moment, and people are choosing to go to, Barcelona instead of a Man City maybe, just to maybe expand the horizons, and I think it is great. But if you like this video, if you could leave a like, and if you could subscribe, that'd be fantastic. And if you could leave a comment, like I say, I'm muchly appreciated. But thanks for watching the video.